Hey friends, it's Miss Murphy here. I am so excited to be with you for another day of multiplication. Yesterday we talked about how we can use different models to show multiplication. We talked about arrays, and we know that arrays have rows and columns. We've also talked about drawing equal groups and making sure that each group has the same number of objects in them. And then we also got to learn about tile squares. Remember how exciting it was to use the tile squares that we got from our VLA kits? I know, very, very exciting. Well, today, friends, we are going to become authors of multiplication. I want you to take a minute to think to yourself, what does that mean? To be an author of multiplication? What? Well, think about, what does an author do? An author writes stories. Friends, that's what we're going to do today. Today, we are going to practice our multiplication and using what we know about multiplication to create story problems. Just like the ones that we read in our math books, we get to be the creators. We are the authors of multiplication, okay? So as we're doing this, we're going to be perfecting our multiplication skills and reviewing all of the things that we have learned this week. So of course, like we always do, we have to start our math lessons with a little bit of a warm up. So I want you to grab a piece of paper, find some space maybe in your math workbook. You are going to need that later to answer these two questions. I want you to draw an array that has 7 rows and 2 columns. All right, so think about that. 7 rows and 2 columns. You're drawing an array. Once you finish number 1, I want you to do number 2. Write a complete multiplication equation for the array you drew in problem 1. All right, so go ahead and pause this video, answer those 2 questions, and then press play when you're ready to continue. All right, friends, so let's chit chat about these 2 problems. So you were asked to draw an array that had 7 rows and 2 columns. Maybe you decided to use some, oh, here comes my dog. Hold on, friends. Hi, Lucy. Anyway, friends, you needed to create an array that had 7 rows and 2 columns. So maybe you used your square tiles to do this, or maybe you drew a picture. I know Miss Murphy personally drew a picture. I made sure that I had 7 rows. So I'm actually going to count to double check that I have 7 rows. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I remember from what we learned this week that rows go this way and columns go that way. All right. So I have 7 rows, and then I knew that I needed to have 2 columns. So my columns go this way, and I've got 1, 2 columns. The next part, question 2, says write a complete multiplication equation for the array you drew in problem 1. I really had to stretch my brain here and remember what we talked about this week. Hopefully, all of you remember that when we were talking about multiplication equations, I reminded you all that the first number right here, so the 7, the first number is always going to represent the number of rows or the number of groups that you have. This is called the factor. You have 2 factors in a multiplication equation, factor 1 and factor 2. Factor 1 will always be the number of groups or the number of rows, which is exactly why we put 7 here as our first factor. Factor 2, friends, will always be the amount or the number you have in each group or row. So factor 2 is how many you have in each group or row. Fabulous. And then does anyone remember what this is over here? when we get our answer, what we call that? Starts with a P. Product. Yes, that's the product. So the product is the total that you have in all. So 7 times 2 is 7 rows of 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip count by 2s 7 times. So I'm going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. All right, so when I skip counted by 2s, I got 14. Awesome. All right, friends, take a moment, pause the video if you need to compare what Ms. Murphy did and what you did, or if you just need to take a break. But we are going to go ahead and move on to the next part of this lesson. Now, friends, you can join us on pages 101 and 102 in your math workbook. So go ahead and pause the video and get out your math workbook so you can follow along on pages 101 and 102. Fantastic. So let's start. Number 1 says explain. Travis drew the picture below to show 4 times 6. What did he do wrong? I want you to take a moment to look at these groups of cherries. What did Travis do wrong? Friends, what do you notice? Let's start with the 4. Let's look at 4 times 6. Ms. Murphy's going to actually start by rewriting 4 times 6 in a different way. I'm going to write 4 times 6 as 4 groups of 6. All right. And the reason I did that is because I know that times, the multiplication symbol in operation times, also means groups of. So I know that 4 times 6 is actually saying 4 groups of 6. So I'm going to start by checking on the number of groups Travis has. So Travis is supposed to have 4 groups. Does he have 4 groups? Let's find out. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, he's got 4 groups of 6. Now I know not 4 groups of 6. He has just 4 groups. We know he has 4 groups. Now we need to check to see, does he have 6 in each group? So we're going to count these cherries one by one. Okay. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hold on a second. I just counted 7 cherries in this group. I wonder if there's 7 cherries in the other groups too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, that one does. What about the third group? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That has 7. And last one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh no! Friends, did you notice what Travis did wrong? He was supposed to make 4 groups of 6. What did he do? Yeah, Travis made 4 groups of 7. That's what he did wrong. He didn't make 4 groups of 6. He made 4 groups of 7. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next one. I think you're really going to like this. Number 2. Write a story problem that could be solved using the multiplication equation 9 times 4 equals 36. Friends, we're going to go ahead and we're going to walk through this one together because this is like the first time in 3rd grade that you've ever made a story problem. You've seen them before, but what we're going to do is create a problem with words that shows 9 times 4 equals 36. So just like up here, when Travis showed 4 groups with 7 cherries in them, odds are Travis actually had a story problem that said, draw 4 groups with 6 cherries in each group because, you're going cherry picking or something like that. So a story problem, if I were to write one for this problem right here, would be Travis and his family went to pick cherries. All right, there we go. So Travis and his family went to pick cherries. There were 4 people picking cherries. Each person picked 7 cherries. How many do they have in all? Right? So Travis and his family went to pick cherries. They had 4 baskets. And this problem says 4 times 6, so we're going to make sure that the story problem says 6, not 7. So they had 4 baskets with 7 cherries in each basket. How many cherries do they have altogether? There you go. How many cherries do they have altogether? So this would be an example of a story problem that went with Travis's problem. So now I want us to work with what we know to create a story problem for the multiplication equation 9 times 4 equals 36. So I want you to pause this video and come up with some story ideas. What are these people doing? What objects or pictures or things are involved in this story? Are you going to talk about rocks? Are you going to talk about shoes? Are you trying to talk about candy and Halloween maybe? So go ahead and pause this video and come up with some writing ideas and try your very best to write a story problem that makes sense for 9 times 4 equals 36, and we'll go over it. All right, friends, so you should have taken a moment to create this story problem. Now, your story will look different than mine. I know that you are not in my brain and I am not in your brain, so we're going to have different kinds of story problems for this problem. So Miss Murphy's story was, Maya bought 9 bags of candy. Each bag had 4 pieces of candy. How many pieces of candy is there in all? So there would be 36 pieces of candy all together. Now, friends, what's really important is no matter what story you made, what I want you to circle in your story are these 2 important things. I need to make sure that you described that there were 9 groups of 4. All right, so you need to make sure that you have 9 groups and then 4 in each group. So the 9 bags of candy in my story represent my 9 groups. When I look at 4, having 4 in each group, I know that there are 4 pieces of candy in each bag. So that is where my 4 comes from. Whenever you're making a story problem, you have to think about your groups and how many you have in those groups to make sure that it makes sense. Okay? Now I want us to think about arrays for a minute. We're going to go to our next problem. So this is problem 3 on your page, so page 101. This is Amelia's array. Amelia has an array to the right, as you can see over here, with triangles. Her array shows 3 times 2 equals 6 because we have 3 rows with 2 in each row and 2 columns. What I want to know, friends, is how will Amelia's array change if she wants to show 4 times 2? Take a moment to think about this. How could Amelia's row array change if she wants to show 4 times 2 equals 8? Well, we know, because we've talked about it a ton, that the first factor in a multiplication problem always tells us the number of groups or the number of rows. So since 4 is the first number, we know that there will now be 4 rows instead of 3. So what are we going to need to do to our array over here, friends? What are we going to need to do? Yes, we have to add a row. So let's add a row to these triangles. How many triangles should I have in this row? If you're not sure, you need to look at the second factor in the multiplication problem. So that is 2. So that tells us that we need to have 2 triangles in our fourth row. Double check your work, friends, by making sure that you have 8 triangles in all. Do you have 8 triangles in all? Yep, we sure do. So let's look down here at this other part right there. If Amelia draws one more triangle on each row of the original array, what multiplication equation would this show? So we're not talking about adding another row. We're talking about adding more triangles to each row that we already have. So we're adding more triangles to these rows. So if Amelia draws one more triangle on each row of the original array, what multiplication equation would this show? Go ahead and write that down. Think about this. I'm going to give you some think time. All right, let's bring it back. If you're not done yet, pause the video and then press play when you're ready. So if we are going to add one more triangle onto each row, so we're adding onto it. We're not adding another row underneath. We're adding onto the rows we already have of the array. What multiplication equation would this show? So what Miss Murphy's going to do first is add a triangle to each row. So now instead of having 2 triangles in each row, I have 3. So this one has 3 now. This row has 3. And this one has 3. My new multiplication equation is going to be 3 times 3 equals 9. And here's why. I have 3 rows. That's my first factor. With 3 triangles in each row. All right, that's how many columns I have. That's why my second factor is also 3. Total, I have 9 triangles in all. So what I did, friends, easy peasy. I just counted each triangle that I had. Or you can skip count by 3s, whichever is easier. All right, friends, we are done with page 101. I want us to go on to review page 102, and we've just got one problem that we're going to do together before you answer an exit ticket for today. This is our good friend Tucker. Tucker wants to use pennies to show 5 times 8. Show what Tucker can do. So your first part of this problem, you are going to draw a model to show the 5 times 8 pennies. Explain what each number means. Once you finish that, there's a part 2. Write a story problem about Tucker's pennies that can be solved using the model you drew. And part A, tell how many pennies Tucker has in all. So what I want you to do is pause this video and then press play when you're ready, okay? All right, friends, so let's look at this just one at a time, okay? So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. So part A asked you to draw a model to show 5 times 8 pennies. Explain what each number means. So you might have decided to use your your tile squares. Maybe you decided to draw groups. So whatever it is you decided to do, maybe it was an array, you had to make sure that the first factor in your multiplication problem, which is 5, was how many groups or how many rows that you had. So if you decided to make groups of pennies, you would want to make sure that you had 5 groups. Then if you were to make I accidentally erased one of my circles. Oh no, come back. There we go. Now, if you decided to use an array, you would have to make sure that you had 5 rows. Okay. So let's count that. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I know I did it again. I erased my group. Oh, silly Miss Murphy. All right. Now we'll have to look at our second factor. Our second factor in any multiplication problem tells us how many are in each group. All right. So we know that there should be 8 pennies in each group over here. So we've got 8, 8, 8, 8, and 8. We also know that if you were to draw an array, you would want to have 8 pennies in each row. So we've got 8 pennies, another group of 8, another row with 8, and another, and another. All right, there you go. And the last part of this problem is asking you to explain what each number means. So if you were to draw groups, you would have said 5 groups of pennies with 8 pennies in each row. If you were to do an array, it would be he has 5 rows with 8 pennies in each row. All right, so take a moment to reflect. Did you do something similar? Did you do something different? Maybe you used tile squares. Miss Murphy just doesn't have those with her at her home, so I couldn't show you that, but that is a great way to do an array as well as with those tile squares. So take a moment to reflect. Now let's look at part B. Part B said, write a story problem. We get to be authors about Tucker's pennies that can be solved using the model you drew in part A. Tell how many pennies Tucker has in all. So friends, if you were to have used the group strategy to draw 5 times 8, you might have said a story like this. Tucker has 5 friends. Each friend gave him 8 pennies. He has 40 pennies in all. 5 times 8 equals 40. So notice, friends, how in this story it says how many people there are. So there's 5 friends. So that tells us there's 5 groups or 5 rows. And it also tells us how many pennies each friend had. Each friend had 8 pennies. And the reason that Tucker has 40 pennies is because all of his friends gave it to him. Lucky him, he got 40 cents. Yeah. All right, so your exit ticket for today, friends. You've done a great job working on some multiplication. I know it is a lot of work. This multiplication is not easy stuff. So take a second to pat yourself on the back, take a deep breath. Make sure you are listening to your teacher for directions about what independent work they want you to do today for math. Maybe your teacher had you do the exit ticket for today that looks like this. So it asks you to answer the question and then turn in the assignment to Google Classroom. So what you're going to be doing is write a story problem for 3 times 4 and then solve it. All right, so there's 2 parts there. And write a complete multiplication equation and explain what each number means. Woo! There's a lot to unpack there, but just remember you are prepared. We did all of that in the lesson today, so if you forget anything, look back at your work in the math book or look back at this video to help you. Friends, thank you so much for joining me. This will be our last lesson for this multiplication lesson. You'll see Miss M for your next one, and I will see you again after that. All right, thanks for joining me. Bye, friends. Have a great day.